It was just a studio photograph of two young women, but if you look closely at what they are holding in their hands, it becomes something more. The photograph arrived at the Georgia Historical Archive inside a donation box from a recently closed antique shop in downtown Atlanta. Among dusty picture frames and forgotten trinkets, archivist Lauren Mitchell discovered it tucked inside a cracked leather portfolio, a studio portrait from 1895, that was surprisingly well preserved despite its age. Lauren gently removed the photograph and placed it under her desk lamp. The image showed two young women, both appearing to be about 16 or 17 years old, seated side by side on an ornate Victorian seat. What immediately caught Lauren's eye was how they were positioned. A white girl and a black girl were sitting together in a formal studio portrait. At a time when such images were almost unheard of in the American South, the white girl wore a high-collared white blouse trimmed with delicate lace, her light hair pulled back in the popular Gibson girl style of the era. The black girl wore a similar blouse, equally refined, her hair styled with the same careful attention. But what truly held Lauren's attention was their hands. They were holding each other's hands, fingers gently intertwined in a clear gesture of friendship and unity. Lauren had worked at the archive for 12 years and had handled thousands of historical photographs. She understood instantly how unusual this was. In Georgia in 1895, only 30 years after the Civil War, the South was deeply entrenched in the Jim Crow era. Segregation laws were harshly enforced, and interracial friendships were not only discouraged, they could be dangerous. For two teenage girls to pose together like this in a professional studio suggested something extraordinary. Lauren reached for her magnifying glass and studied the photograph more closely. The studio's mark was embossed in the lower right corner, Whitmore Photography, Atlanta, 1895. She made a note to research the studio later. As she examined the girls' faces, both solemn and steady in the way people pose. For photographs at that time, her attention shifted to their free hands. Each girl held a small object resting in her palm. Lauren adjusted her lamp and leaned in. The objects appeared to be identical, round, and possibly made of metal. Coins, maybe. She could not make out the details with her eyes alone. The photograph would need to be scanned at high resolution. A familiar thrill of discovery ran through Lauren. This was not just an unusual photograph. It was a mystery, and somewhere inside this fading image was a story that had been waiting for 129 years to be uncovered. Lauren spent her lunch break setting up the high-resolution scanner in the archive's digitization lab. The photograph lay flat on the scanner bed, secured with archival corner mounts to prevent damage. She adjusted the settings to capture maximum detail, 3,200 dots per inch, full color preservation, and multiple exposure passes to account for the photograph's age and fading. The scanner hummed softly as the light bar moved slowly across the image. Lauren watched the preview screen as the digital file appeared pixel by pixel, revealing textures and detail invisible to the naked eye. The process took nearly 30 minutes, but the result was remarkable. The digital file contained every tiny detail of the original photograph. Lauren opened it in her professional imaging software and immediately zoomed into 600%, focusing on the objects in the girl's hands. Now she could see them clearly. They were medallions, roughly 2 inches in diameter, likely made of bronze or copper. Each medallion hung from a delicate chain that could be seen between the girl's fingers. Lauren increased the magnification to 1000% and adjusted contrast and sharpness. The surface of the medallions came into focus, and her breath caught. They were engraved with detailed symbols, a book, an oil lamp, and what appeared to be two hands clasped together. Around the edge of each medallion ran a ring of tiny letters or numbers, still too small to read clearly. She saved the image and opened it in specialized enhancement software used for forensic photo analysis. By applying filters, edge detection, and sharpening techniques, she slowly brought the tiny markings into view. The letters formed words in Latin. At the top were the words Scientia Luminat, and beneath the central symbols was a series of numbers. 33.7490, 84,380. Lauren quickly wrote everything down in her notebook. The Latin phrase translated to knowledge, illuminates. The numbers looked like coordinates, latitude and longitude. She opened a mapping program and entered them. The point landed in Atlanta, in what is now the Sweet Auburn Historic District. In 1895, it would have been part of a growing black neighborhood. The exact location fell on a street corner, where, according to current maps, an old church building still stood. Lauren leaned back in her chair, her thoughts racing. These medallions were not simple jewelry or friendship tokens. They were deliberately designed to carry a hidden message. But why? And why would two teenage girls in Atlanta in 1895 need to hide information in such a careful way? She zoomed out and looked again at the girls' faces. Their serious expressions now seemed less like the stiff style of old photography and more like quiet determination. Lauren spent the rest of the afternoon researching Whitmore photography. The studio had operated in Atlanta from 1889 to 1903 and was owned by Albert Whitmore. City directories and old newspapers described him as a portrait photographer known for serving Atlanta. Emerging black middle class, an unusual practice for a white photographer at the time. She found an obituary from 1904 in the Atlanta Constitution. It described Whitmore as a respected photographer with progressive views, a commitment to documenting all of Atlanta's citizens with equal dignity. The wording felt careful, almost coded, suggesting his work had stirred controversy. Lauren contacted the Atlanta History Center, knowing they held extensive business records. By late afternoon, a colleague named Marcus located 3 ledger books from Whitmore photography preserved in their collection. He scanned the relevant pages and sent them to her. When the files arrived, Lauren searched through the handwritten entries. Whitmore had carefully recorded each sitting, listing names, dates, payments, and brief notes. The entries from 1895 filled several pages. Then she found it. August 12, 1895, portrait sitting. Miss Catherine Henderson and Miss Sarah Williams, payment rendered in full. Special request for privacy. No display in studio window. 2 copies ordered, small format. Additional engraving work on tokens included in commission. Lauren stared at the screen. The girls had names. Catherine Henderson and Sarah Williams. Whitmore had engraved the medallions himself or arranged for it. The request for privacy and the instruction not to display the photograph suggested the girls or their families knew how dangerous the image could be. Lauren began searching census records, starting with the 1900 federal census. Catherine Henderson was hard to trace. The name was common, and she found several white families with that surname. Sarah Williams was even more difficult. There were dozens of entries for black women with that name. She needed more clues. Lauren returned to the photograph and examined every detail again. The girls' clothing, while similar in style, showed slight difference in fabric quality that hinted at their families' economic backgrounds. The furniture they sat on was expensive, suggesting this was not a cheap portrait. Then Lauren noticed something she had missed before. A small pin on Catherine's collar, barely visible even in the high-resolution scan. She enhanced the image and saw partial letters, AFS. The next morning, Lauren researched Atlanta schools from the 1890s. The initials were difficult to trace, as many records from that period had been lost. She contacted Dr. Raymond Parker, a retired Emory University history professor who specialized in post-Civil War education in Georgia. Dr. Parker called her back within an hour, sounding excited. He suggested the letters might stand for Atlanta Female Seminary, a private girls' school that operated from 1881 to 1897. It served wealthy white families, as required by law at the time, but he said there had been rumors. The headmistress, Eliza Foster, was believed to hold abolitionist sympathies and progressive views even after the war. There were whispers that she secretly taught black girls in the evenings, using the school after white students had gone home. Nothing was ever proven, and the school closed suddenly in 1897 amid a scandal the newspapers never fully explained. Lauren's heart raced. Dr. Parker added that while the school's records were supposedly destroyed in an 1898 fire, he knew Eliza Foster's great-great-granddaughter, Virginia Foster Chen, who still lived in Atlanta and kept family papers. 2 days later, Lauren sat in Virginia Chen's living room in the Virginia Highland neighborhood. Virginia, a retired librarian in her 70s, had laid several boxes of documents on her dining table. She spoke warmly about her great-great-grandmother, describing Eliza as a woman who believed education was a basic right, regardless of race or gender. She explained how dangerous that belief had been in the 1890s. From one box, she removed a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed but intact. It was Eliza Foster's private diary, never published and hidden by the family for generations. Lauren carefully opened the journal. The entries were written in neat cursive, dated from 1881 to 1897. She turned to August 1895 and began reading. Eliza wrote that she had done something that could destroy everything she had built, but she could not refuse. Catherine Henderson and Sarah Williams had asked permission to have their photograph taken together to mark their graduation from the secret evening academy. Eliza had arranged the sitting with Albert Whitmore, whom she trusted completely. She wrote of the girls studying together for 4 years, learning literature, mathematics, science, and philosophy side by side, proving that society's barriers meant nothing in the pursuit of knowledge. As Virginia made tea, Lauren continued reading. The journal described the evening academy in careful detail. It had begun in 1882, just 1 year after the seminary opened. By day, the school served its official purpose. By night, it served truth. Eliza recruited 4 unmarried women teachers who lived on the premises and could control access. White students attended classes during the day. After they left, the teachers waited hours before admitting black students through a rear entrance. Classes were kept small to reduce risk. One entry from September 1890. One mentioned Catherine and Sarah joining at age 13, eager to learn. Over the years, Eliza wrote of their progress, their deepening friendship, and their growing understanding of the danger they faced. In 1893, she recorded that the girls asked what would happen if they were discovered. Eliza answered honestly, explaining the risks, and wrote that some truths were worth the danger. Virginia pointed to another unopened box. It contained letters exchanged between Eliza and the families of her evening students writ 10 in code using book ciphers and substitutions. Even in private, they could not risk speaking plainly. Lauren opened the box and found dozens of carefully preserved envelopes. She selected one dated August 1895, addressed to Mrs. Henderson. The letter was short and carefully worded. Your daughter has completed her studies with outstanding distinction. The token we discussed has been prepared and will be presented at the ceremony. May it serve its purpose should the need ever arise. The tokens, Lauren said softly, looking up at Virginia. The medallions in the photograph. Eliza arranged for them to be made. Virginia nodded. Graduation gifts, yes, but also something practical, I believe. Lauren returned to the archive the next morning carrying photographs of key pages from Eliza Foster's journal, which Virginia had allowed her to document. She immediately pulled up the coordinates, engraved on the medallions 30. 3, Shu 49, Nur, Audifira, 3, 0. The location in Sweet Auburn pointed directly to the corner of Auburn Avenue and Bell Street, where an old church building still stood. Lauren researched the site using property records and historical maps. In 1895, the building had been Bethlehem African Methodist Episcopal Church, a central pillar of Atlanta's black community. Built in 1887, the church was more than a place of worship. It served as a community center, a school, and a meeting place for civic groups. Lauren discovered a reference in a church newsletter from 1896 preserved on microfilm. It listed a position announcement. Miss Sarah Williams, recent graduate of private study, will be assisting Reverend Thomas with Sunday school and weekday tutoring. The congregation welcomes her service. So Sarah had returned to her community and immediately begun teaching. But what about Catherine? Lauren searched city directories and census records until she finally found a Catherine Henderson listed in the 1900 census as a private tutor living in a boarding house near Atlanta's 4th Ward, an area that was slowly becoming more mixed despite segregation laws. When she cross-checked addresses, she noticed something remarkable. Catherine's boarding house was only 3 blocks from Bethlehem AIM Church. The 2 young women had remained close, working side by side, even while society demanded they live apart. Lauren decided to visit Bethlehem AIM Church, which was still active in the same building, though renovated many times over the years. She called ahead and explained her research. The church secretary connected her with Deacon Morris, an elderly man who had been a member for more than 60 years and was known as the church's unofficial historian. Deacon Morris met Lauren on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. He was 84, with white hair and gentle eyes that still sparkled with sharp intelligence. He walked her through the church, pointing out original details that had survived the renovation. "This church has always been more than a church," he said as they went down to the basement. "During Jim Crow, when black folks were denied proper education, we provided it here. Before integration, when mixed meetings were dangerous, this basement hosted many quiet gatherings of people who believed in equality." The basement was now used for storage and fellowship events, but Deacon Morris led Lauren to a back corner filled with stacked chairs and old furniture. "We found something here about 20 years ago during renovations," he said. "We didn't fully understand it, but we knew it mattered, so we kept it safe." He pulled out a wooden crate and opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of medallions, identical to the ones in the photograph, each engraved with the same symbols and coordinates. Beneath them lay a ledger book titled Evening Academy Graduates 1882 to 1897. Lauren's hands shook as she opened the ledger. It was organized by year, listing each graduate's name, age, parent or guardian, and a short note about what they did afterward. Deacon Morris pulled up 2 folding chairs, and they sat together reading. The first entry was dated June 1883. Rebecca Thompson, age 17, daughter of James Thompson, minister. Completed 4-year course of study, currently teaching Sunday school. 15 names followed for that year alone, each representing a young black woman who had risked everything to gain an education society denied her. Lauren turned the pages year by year, watching the list grow. By 1890, the Evening Academy was graduating 20 to 25 students each year. The notes revealed a growing network. Graduates became teachers themselves, tutoring younger students, opening small schools in their homes, or working as governesses for sympathetic white families where they quietly taught beyond the limits of official schooling. When Lauren reached August 1895, she found the entries she had been searching for. Sarah Williams, age 16, daughter of Benjamin Williams, printer. Completed 4-year course. Exceptional in mathematics and literature. Will teach at Bethlehem. Directly below was Catherine Henderson, age 16, daughter of Thomas Henderson, railroad clerk. Completed 4-year course alongside Sarah Williams. First white student of the Evening Academy. Committed to continuing integrated education work. Deacon Morris leaned in closer. First white student, he repeated softly. I never knew. All these years, I believed the academy served only black students. Lauren explained that Catherine's mother had worked at the day school and somehow learned about the Evening Academy. She must have convinced Eliza Foster to accept her daughter. It would have been dangerous for everyone involved. Lauren continued reading. Catherine's entry included extra notes, given special medallion, and coded safe locations for integrated study. Work to continue independently but in coordination with academy graduates. Communication to be maintained through coded correspondence. Suddenly, everything made sense. The medallions were not just graduation keepsakes. They were tools, encoding the locations of safe places where integrated education could continue. Each medallion held different coordinates. Lauren checked several from the crate and confirmed that each pointed to a different place around Atlanta. These were meeting places, Lauren said. A whole hidden network across the city. The medallions let graduates recognize one another and know it was safe to speak freely and work together. Deacon Morris nodded slowly, hidden in plain sight, just like this church. On Sundays, we looked like any other congregation. During the week, we were running schools, planning, teaching. Authorities suspected, but they could never prove it. Lauren turned to the final pages of the ledger. The last entry, dated May 1897, read, Final graduation held in private. 16 students completed course. Evening Academy closing due to increased surveillance and threats. Graduates equipped with medallions and instructed to continue coordination. Network continues. Below it, written later, in different handwriting were the wards the Evening Academy ended, but its work did not. Graduates taught for decades, educating hundreds, some lived to see integration, all kept the faith. Deacon Morris then unlocked a filing cabinet in the church office. When we digitized our records years ago, we set aside letters that seemed coded, he said. We didn't understand them, but we knew they mattered. He handed Lauren a folder containing dozens of letters dated between 1895 and 1920. Lauren spread them across the desk and immediately recognized the book cipher system Eliza had described. Each letter referenced books, chapters, and word position. To outsiders, they looked like ordinary letters about scripture and literature. To those who knew the code, they carried instructions and updates. Lauren photographed several letters and spent that evening decoding them using common books from the era, including the King James Bible, Shakespeare, and Tennyson. The first decoded letter, dated September 1895, was from Sarah. To Catherine it read, meeting successful, 7 new students enrolled. Location secure, assistance with mathematics curriculum welcomed. Book distribution arranged. Coordinates remain valid. Hope sustained. The letters revealed a remarkable operation. After the academy closed, graduates continued teaching independently across homes, churches, and businesses. Catherine taught white students during the day as a private tutor, then secretly taught black students at night, using the network's safe location. Sarah coordinated efforts from Bethlehem, matching students with teachers, distributing books, and maintaining communication. One letter from 1898 described danger, incident last week. Suspected but not confirmed. Operations moved to alternate location per medallion coordinates. All students safe. Increased caution required. Trust the pattern, the pattern. The medallion system allowed them to adapt quickly, shifting locations without risky direct communication. Lauren found letters spanning more than 2 decades. The handwriting changed as the writers aged, and the tone matured from youthful resolve to seasoned wisdom. A letter from 1910 mentioned 17 teachers working independently, educating an estimated 300 students in a single year. By 1915, the tone shifted again. The world moves slowly toward justice. Our work continues with less danger now. The struggle is not finished. The final letter, dated 1920, was written in shaky handwriting Lauren recognized as Catherine's. Dearest Sarah, 40 years since we met in Eliza's classroom. Our medallions, worn smooth by time, still guide us. How many have we taught? How many lives changed? We cannot measure it fully, but we know it matters. The Evening Academy may be history, but its light still shines. With eternal friendship, Catherine. Lauren spent the next 3 weeks tracing descendants of the Evening Academy graduates. Using the registry, genealogical records, and community forums, she slowly gathered responses. Then they came in a rush. She organized a gathering at the Georgia Historical Archive one Saturday in October. 43 people attended, representing 17 families connected to the academy. Lauren began by projecting the photograph of Catherine and Sarah, the image of the 2 young women holding hands and clutching their medallions filled the room with quiet power. This photograph was taken 129 years ago, Lauren said. These 2 16-year-old girls risked everything to learn together and remain friends in a society that forbade it. They didn't just save themselves, they spent their lives teaching others. She showed the medallions and explained the network. A woman named Grace Thompson stood up. My grandmother was Rebecca Thompson, one of the first graduates. I have her medallion. Others spoke up. 5 people had brought medallions passed down through generations. An elderly man named James Williams stood next. Sarah Williams was my great-great-grandmother. I knew she was a teacher, but I never knew this story. He opened a small box containing Sarah's medallion and a photograph from 1939. It showed Sarah and Catherine in their 60s, standing together outside Bethlehem AIM Church, arms around each other, smiling. 3 months later, the Georgia Historical Archive opened a permanent exhibition. The centerpiece was the restored photograph of Catherine and Sarah, displayed with medallions, the graduate registry, and selections from Eliza Foster's journal and coded letters. As visitors moved through the exhibit, Lauren watched 2 elderly women, one white and one black, standing together before the photograph, holding hands just like the girls in the image. One turned to Lauren and said, My grandmother knew Catherine Henderson. The other added, and my grandmother was taught by Sarah Williams. Lauren smiled, thinking of the medallions and their inscription. Knowledge illuminates. Catherine and Sarah had understood that truth at 16, and they spent their lives proving it. What seemed like a simple photograph had revealed a quiet revolution built on courage, friendship, and the unstoppable power of education.